Within the autobiographical play, What the Constitution Means to Me, playwright Heidi Schreck mentions another play, Red Noses by Peter Barnes, which was first produced at the Royal Shakespeare Company in the mid-1980s. Taking place during the Black Plague in 1300s France, the play centers around the character Marcel Flotte, who embarks on an impossible, holy mission to spread laughter by way of comfort and relief to his dying countrymen. It may be a deep cut. It can't be coincidence that Schreck mentions it. Indeed, in her own work, she tackles the tricky and tangled impact of the supreme law of our land on her own life and history, even as Flotte does, with reverence and a great deal of humor. Welcome to Forward Theater, and welcome to our pre-show introduction to What the Constitution Means to Me. I'm Marcella Kearns, Artistic Associate at Forward, and I'll be your guide on an inside look at the play, its history, production team, and more. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to start with the play and production history. What the Constitution Means to Me as a full-length play debuted in 2017. It really dates back to then. A Tony nominee for Best Play and a Pulitzer finalist in 2019, the play began as a 10-minute piece that Schreck expanded over the course of several years. It premiered originally as part of Summerworks in New York City 2017 as a co-production between Clubbed Thumb and True Love Productions. True Love Productions, in fact, commissioned the play. Between then and 2019, the play hopped from Berkeley, Rep, to off-Broadway, finally landing on Broadway at the Hayes Theater in March of 2019. Theater critic Jesse Green of the New York Times declared it not just the best play to open on Broadway so far this season, but also the most important. It is, quote, nothing less than a chronicle of the legal subjugation of women by men as experienced in the day-to-day injustices of living while female and in the foundational American document that offers paltry recourse. But if What the Constitution Means to Me is nothing less than that, it is also very much more. It is a tragedy told as a comedy, a work of inspired protest, a slyly crafted piece of persuasion, and a tangible contribution to the change it seeks. The New Yorker had already touted its value in 2018, actually. In this dire moment of cultural fragmentation, Schreck is offering an oasis of connection, a place where humanity and learning are being celebrated and protected. She is able to pull this off in part because the world she presents is not one of positions and stances, but of curiosity and openness. Schreck makes real the concepts that on paper seem intangible, that we each have agency to participate in the national dialogue in healthy, productive ways, that underneath the blighted soil of today's awfulness is a more dignified and still accessible reality. Perhaps most incredibly of all, the show offers evidence that there are still reasons to have faith in the future of America. It's a gift as improbable as it is welcome. For 90 blessed minutes, the world seems sane again. Nominated for multiple awards, Constitution won the Obie Award for Best New American Play, the Off-Broadway Alliance Award for Best New Play, and the New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best American Play. It was nominated for a Tony not only for Best Play, but also for Best Actress, and the Drama Desk Awards gave it the same nod for nominations for Outstanding Play and Outstanding Actress in a Play. The filmed version of the production also enjoyed a host of honors and nominations. Though she hadn't originally conceived of writing a piece for herself in which to perform, Schreck shared in those early productions and starred in them. A tour with another actress was cut short because of the pandemic. When it resumed in 2021, it enjoyed a 2-day stay at the Overture as part of an 11-city stint. Notably, the text of the play shifted to reflect other actresses stepping in for and as Schreck. About Heidi Schreck herself. She will tell you quite a lot of personal stories about herself through Colleen Madden when you go to the performance, including where she's from, Wenatchee, Washington. But here's a little more. She lives in Brooklyn. As the pandemic was ratcheting up in 2020, she became a mother to twin daughters. An actor, playwright, and screenwriter, she has won 3 Obie Awards, a Drama Desk Award, a Theatre World Award, the Horton Foote Playwriting Award, and Smithsonian Magazine's 2019 American Ingenuity Award for her work in the performing arts. Other plays include Grand Concourse, The Consultant, Creature, and There Are No Big Secrets. You may have heard her writing on shows such as Billions and Nurse Jackie. As a playwright, she encapsulates her work so. Her, quote, preferred form of theater is to set things next to each other and let you draw the conclusions. Side note, if after seeing this production, you're hungry for more, you can see Schreck herself perform the filmed version via Amazon Prime. So this season, Ford has offered as many options for digital viewing of our productions as possible. For Constitution, we actually weren't allowed to license that because it's still possible to see this particular filmed version. So if you take a look, then let us know what you think. I'd like to turn now to our artistic director, who also directed this play. So last summer, Jen Uphoff Gray was on a call with another artistic director she'd met on a regular conference call with artistic directors around the country. This will sound familiar to you. She was talking about their 2022-2023 season and what it was including, and Jen saw that there was so much overlap, from Clyde's to The Wanderers, that when she saw they were doing what the Constitution means to me, it was like a light bulb went off. Now, Ford had tried to get the rights to do it pre-pandemic, and we couldn't acquire those rights because of the national tour. Though the production did stop by the Overture, it did come through during a surge in the virus, and Jen calculated that the audience wasn't so large that it wouldn't be attractive to have in the city for a more substantial run. It hit a Ford sweet spot, emotional, comedic, engaging, but also very much a thinking piece. Its counterpart, a visual feast and delight of the senses, The Flying Lovers of Vitebsk, was really a natural match to balance out the winter and spring portions of our season with each other. Now, Jen saw the Broadway production in 2019, and from that time on wanted to direct the play with Colleen Madden as Heidi. So when the idea resurfaced, she reached out to Colleen right away. This piece is one that not only requires substantial direct address to and interaction with the audience, a role that an actor versed in Shakespeare such as Colleen is would have the skills to address, but it requires stamina, emotional resilience, and charisma to hold an audience for this length. Colleen has a wealth of all, and we're so glad she was able to return to Forward to take it on. Now to the play itself, some text and context. For a deeper reflection on the play, its themes, its resonance, I'd like to refer you to advisory company member Mike Fisher's essay in your program. For today, however, I'd like to fill you in on some behind-the-scenes stories connected to the script and the production. First, updating the text. As the Constitution is a living document, and as our laws are ever evolving, one of the most important production tasks that Jen flagged was making sure that the play, which discusses amendments and Supreme Court rulings in detail, really reflects changes that have occurred since it was first produced. Constitution was written before and has been performed before some significant rulings, and the original text no longer accounted for those changes. I speak specifically of the overturn of Roe versus Wade. You'll hear within the discussion of rights in the scripts that this new development is now acknowledged. We obtained express permission to update the language in the play to reflect 2024. Now, licensing a play for production means that a theater is obligated to perform the play as written, no alterations, and Forward will adhere to our agreements. But this permission, along with a few other textual changes, was an agreed upon exception to make sure that our audiences are experiencing the most current dialogue possible. Now, on a lighter note, changes to the text have been happening throughout the course of the play's history, even on Broadway. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg attended the production at the Hayes Theater in June 2019. In an interview with Time, Schreck recalled that one of the debaters on the production always had a pencil with RBG printed on it behind her ear as they performed. Upon hearing that Justice Ginsburg was in the audience that day, says Schreck, the debater nearly collapsed backstage. She continues, and I quote, "She sent a nice letter to us afterward and asked us for a copy of the script. I told my stage manager I was nervous to send it to her because I was sure she would find errors in the script. He said, 'Oh, Heidi, stop it. She doesn't have time to read your play. It's just a symbolic act.' A few days later, I got a FedEx package that had a copy of one of the cases that I discussed flagged with some things to look at, and then a letter thanking me for the script and giving me 2 notes. One had to do with changing a piece of language from would have to might have. She wanted me to be more precise with my language. The other one had to do with how to talk about the Equal Rights Amendment." Another bit of context: assistant director as dramaturg. Our production of Constitution really benefited from the support of our our assistant director to our artistic director directing. Uh, Orion Risk, a PhD candidate in interdisciplinary studies at the University of Wisconsin. They were at Jen's side to afford the team broader context and a more efficient process. They serve on the literary and finance committees at Ford and also directed one of our monologues in our monologue festival last May. Normally, the scope of an assistant director's duties really shifts from production to production. Orion has been responsible in this instance for background research, observing to offer touchstone for Jen, and taking on rehearsal blocks with young performers. More to come on that note. Their work started with Heidi Schreck's 2-page reading list of resources in the script. Orion tracked down all of the sources to review them for the sake of the team. In this process, they distilled points into a research hub, a digestible pile for Jen and the actors. They also tracked down background on where the play came from its 10-minute inception to its Broadway run. But that wasn't all. Research extended to and related to sometimes surprising topics, from high school debate structure, what does it look like, to what is log rolling? Yes, wait for it. You'll hear it in the script. One particularly impactful resource, however, that Orion found on Heidi's list was J.L. Herman's Trauma and Recovery. It's not always possible for us to trace a writer's direct line of thinking from idea to the page, but Orion found it evocative to consider the, quote, idea of Heidi reading this particular work when she was writing this play and working to understand trauma in her family and her life, and connecting that to our national atrocities that, like traumas, have often been met with denial, repression, and disassociation. I'd like to share the material Orion pulled for our acting company as they examined the autobiographical elements of the play. and to consider how we ourselves are working through trauma as a nation. Here are 3 points. The first, equally as powerful as the desire to deny atrocities is the conviction that denial does not work. Folk wisdom is filled with ghosts who refuse to rest in their graves until their stories are told. Murder will out. Remembering and telling the truth about terrible events are prerequisites, both for the restoration of the social order and for the healing of individual victims. A second point. The psychological distress symptoms of traumatized people simultaneously call attention to the existence of an unspeakable secret and deflect attention from it. This is most apparent in the way traumatized people alternate between feeling numb and reliving the event. Third point, the knowledge of horrible events periodically intrudes into public awareness that is rarely retained, but is rarely retained for long. Denial, repression, and disassociation operate on a social as well as an individual level. The study of psychological trauma has an underground history. Like traumatized people, we have been cut off from the knowledge of our past. Like traumatized people, we need to understand the past in order to reclaim the present and the future. Here, we come full circle to Jesse Green's words about the play. Heidi Schreck is working through a tragedy indeed, but like Float and Red Noses, she's healing through comedy. I'd like to move to a little bit more context. This production, actually, this is more inside scoop. This production is part of an academic study. Speaking of Orion is working on a dissertation and exploring questions of care in performance and gender, and is using Constitution as an active study therein. I recently asked Orion to break down their research for us. In their own words, care has a very broad meaning. It's everything we do that helps one another exist in as good a way as possible. In the rehearsal room, I'm thinking about how in acting, care is part of a rehearsal and the performance process. How is it so? What can this production and the performance of this play itself teach me about care? Specifically, the reality is that we will never give all the care we would like to give to others and receive all the care we would like to receive. That conflict is central in many ways to this play and this production. The character of the debater in the play, though, talks about how perfection may never be achieved, but how there is capability of change in both ourselves and in our founding document. As part of a larger question about the art form of the theater, Orion is seeing the human encounter becoming more and more precious. In the play, Heidi talks about being seen and seeing others as a human being. That presence, that care, will be apparent as part of the structure of the play itself. Actor Kazim Abulhad, for example, reflected at the designer run that his character ends up modeling what it means to listen to a woman. What is invisible, unheard? What is broached? As you watch the play, I invite you to consider where you see it, where it is overt and where it may be covert. Here's an extra bonus: listening to debate. Now, part of this production will dip into the world of high school debate. You'll see opponents duke it out on stage. How to debate, win, and maintain an atmosphere of civil discourse. Rebecca DeVitt online offers 10 tips and techniques on how to debate that Orion shared with our actors. Shared as part of this distillation, this digestible pile for the acting company, it nevertheless feels like a refresher for my own public speech as well. Here they are, 10 tips. Number 1, preparation of your topic. Number 2, stay on topic. Number 3, speak slowly, clearly, and charismatically. 4, be confident with your topic. 5, think about your body language and what it's saying to your audience. 6, listen and take notes. 7, anticipate your opponent's questions before they're uttered. 8, tell a story or give an illustration with an example to make your point. 9, use a strong conclusion. 10, don't take cheap shots at your opponents. Whether you've debate in your history or not, I invite you to consider how you see the actor characters adhering to these tools when you go to the production. How even are these tools useful, in fact, in any disagreement? Next, I'd like to take us to our production team itself. This is a play about people, so it's really, truly my pleasure to introduce you to or refresh you on those whose work on this production and their process of world building is so rich. Starting with our design team, our scenic designer, Lisa Schlenker, returns to Forward after envisioning Forward's pandemic-era online production of The Niceties, and prior to that, 2019's Mary Jane. She's the resident designer and production manager at Northern Sky Theater in Door County and a frequent freelance designer for theaters in the Milwaukee area as well. At first rehearsal, she dissected the artistic inspiration behind the physical environment you'll see in the theater today. She says, as Jen and I were going through the play, we both agreed that Heidi, when she's 15, should feel kind of boxed in and compressed by the environment and the old white men that were responsible for writing these words and crafting these decisions that spring from the Constitution. We ended up with a literal shoebox diorama with big swaths of Constitution decoupage along with trappings of a Legion Hall. When we step out of that, she's surrounded on the thrust stage by civics, law, and government textbooks that Heidi chose to dig into as she was coming of age. The script calls for itself a diorama of an American Legion Hall that a teenage girl might have made in high school. So Lisa's instincts were really to lean into the literal as well as the imaginative. The constellation of faces that you'll see above the diorama started out just being legionnaires, as the script suggests, but you'll notice in our production that some Supreme Court justices and founding fathers also appear. Their impact and relevance to the story of the play, Jen and Lisa considered really, they thought warranted their presence. Advisory company member and lighting designer Noel Stolmack isn't one to take the spotlight. I know, cue the groans. Sorry, Noel. On this production, her natural inclinations reflect the needs of the show. My goal, she said, will be for people to feel the light cues, but not see them. Noel's work was most recently seen on the Forward stage in last year's world premiere production of Artemisia by Lauren Gunderson, and she also worked with Lisa on Mary Jane. Noel is world-class. Her work has appeared around the globe, from the Sydney Opera House to the Library of Congress Theater, and you've definitely seen it in Wisconsin if you're a theater goer. One interesting coincidence, both this script and the script of Artemisia discuss the idea of the penumbra, the meeting of light and shadow, so listen for it here. Next, to our costume designer, Ren Ledasser. Ren is a returning collaborator with Ford. Her most recent productions include Feeding Beatrice and Russian Troll Farm, along with Life Sucks just before the inception of the pandemic. While she spent 7 years in New York, including working off and on Broadway, she's now based in the Midwest. In visualizing the costumes for Constitution, Wren shared at first rehearsal that she sought to make each human on stage look like the best version of themselves. This was a real opportunity for actors to collaborate with their designer. Wren sought to talk about what the best version of themselves should look like. This is a play, she said, in which clothes are clothes, but how the individual appears has been specifically shopped and curated. Joe Cerqua, who is Chicago-based, is Forward's resident composer and sound designer and has done both of those things for this play. He's designed over 30 productions for the company over the course of its 15 years. Joe's presentation at first rehearsal for Constitution summed up his work on this production so: we'll be hearing a bunch of songs by strong women. Inside the play, there are some recordings of justices, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which were fun to find, but even more fun to clean up. Joe and Jen collaborated to create our lobby ambiance, actually. 40 minutes of feminist songs that will be playing out in the lobby and in the playhouse before the show. Our props master, Pam Miles, is wrapping up her 11th season with Forward with Constitution. As props master, she's had an Everest of a year, from garbage for garbologists to consumable sandwich fixings for Clydes to an airport terminal's worth of suitcases for flying lovers. Here, her hand is subtle. For example, collaborating with actors on a host of paper props, from note cards to larger paper speeches, size, color, print size, copy, and more. Now, frequently, props designers are working on acquiring or refining pieces deep into the technical rehearsal process as director and actors experiment with and land on what is most attuned both to practical needs and character choice. Pam's not just our props master, she's a master at this work, and I'd like to take this moment to thank her for that time and care. Of note, an introduction to and news about other production team members. Our stage manager, Rivka Kelly, is making her debut with Forward. A traveling stage manager, according to her bio, she has settled in the Midwest and locally has stage managed over 5 seasons at APT. Her most recent work was on The Thin Place with Two Crows Theater, also based in Spring Green. Assistant director Orion Risk, who I've mentioned, is enjoying their Forward main stage debut. Assistant stage manager Abby Hess, a real long-time ASM for Forward, has actually just joined Actors Equity Association, the union of professional actors and stage managers in the United States, with this production. So if you happen to see Abby, make sure to congratulate her. Kevin Zimmer, our technical director, has worked with Forward since 2009. As he shifts gears in the coming season, we'd also like to celebrate his long tenure and work with us. And now to artists on the stage. As I mentioned earlier, Constitution features Wisconsin favorite Colleen Madden as Heidi. Core company member at APT, Colleen returns to the Forward stage after Heisenberg in our 2018-2019 season. This is her 7th production on our main stage. Joining her is Cosimo Bluchon in his 2nd Forward production. You saw him as Igor in Russian Troll Farm just as we were turning live from the pandemic. Cosimo is also an advisory company member for Forward and will be assistant directing our production of Murder Girl this fall. Now to the debaters. You've heard me speak a lot about the actor characters, but let's hear about the actors themselves. They are both young performers making their debut with Forward. Now, an essential component of the play features a debate between Colleen and a high school debater, and as is tradition with this piece, we've hired local high school students. As they're young performers, they will alternate performances, so you'll only see one of them at your performance, but I can assure you that they have formed a tight rehearsal hall duo. They're supporters of each other and of their colleagues in the room. They are voracious learners, and they are curious seekers. Both of them answered Forward's call to audition for the play because of their interests in politics, theater, and public speaking. Shout out to their drama instructors, Eric Brame and Dave Pausch, who let them know about this opportunity. Thank you so much. They're wonderful. Their audition wove these interests together, politics and theater. They not only had to read from the script, but Jen also asked them to speak extemporaneously about a right particularly dear to them. In fact, all of our auditioning actors shared a different mention of a right, a whole swath, everything from the Ninth Amendment to the 14th, to the right to choose, the right to vote, freedom of speech, and the right to protest. I'd like to introduce you to the ones we chose now with their own words. Alia Krieger attends Sauk Prairie High School. She's shared that her relationship with the Constitution has been on an enemies to lovers trope and back again as she's worked on this play. She recalled for us that her experience of the first day at rehearsal, she received some words of advice. Here's her story. The first read-through, I was so nervous since it was in front of all these people that I deemed to be very important. Colleen was absolutely fantastic and told me that you get nervous every time, but you have to allow yourselves to make mistakes and to be boring. That made me feel so much better. However, when it came time to start the read-through, Colleen broke out into the most beautiful and well-rehearsed version of this play. She was practically memorized in the beginning, which makes a lot of sense now since she had about 1 skrillion lines to learn in 3 weeks. But in that moment, I felt so betrayed. Not actually, she says. She was in awe and says that she loves Colleen and the rest of the production team. Alia, we love you too. Our other debater, Caroline Tallis, attends La Follette High School, Ford's adopt school partner. She had this to say about the impact of the play on her outside the theater. My dad is a lawyer, she said, so I have always been very aware of the Constitution and a lot of the history behind it. As I have grown older, I have also become more critical of many things that were included or not included in the original iteration of the document. Being involved in this play has reminded me of the importance of being an active participant in democracy. In the debate, I'm interacting with Colleen, the audience, adding to my notes, constantly being involved. Even when I am not the one presenting my points, I have to be an active listener. There's a line that I say in the first version of the debate. There are 2 versions, maybe more. Democracy is not something that happens to us because we magically change a piece of paper. Democracy is something we have to make happen. We have to fight for. That moment is particularly impactful. I think about it a lot as we run through the play, especially as a young person who tries to be actively involved in politics. The idea that if we want to make changes and improve our conditions as women and people who live in this country, we have to take active steps to disrupt in big and small ways the status quo and the people who have always had the decision-making power. I think that this show is so relevant to our current situation and will only grow more relevant as time goes on. You'll get to know one of them a little better today. Here's to our young people. This actually takes me full circle as well to the theater critics who spoke about the New York productions and said, it's possible to have faith. As I wrap up and prepare to send you into the playhouse, a few more items of note. I suggest that you take a look at our lobby display just outside the doors to the playhouse. On the display, you'll be able to connect to Supreme Court rulings mentioned in the play in an easy-to-capture visual, and you'll be able to compare the language of our Constitution's preamble to some much more recently written around the globe. I also invite you to check out materials on the table just outside the playhouse from organizations whose work connects with content of the play. For those of you who are information gatherers, I assure you a feast awaits. As always, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you in May at Edgewood College for readings of 3 new plays by Wisconsin writers. Forward Theater's Wisconsin Writes New Play Festival will feature new work by Forward's writer-in-residence, Quan Berry, Madison-based playwright Lila Hovey, and Sheboygan-based playwright Thomas Campbell. From trebuchets to dissections to chickens and beyond, there's something to everyone's taste awaiting you. Till soon, thank you once again, and enjoy.